All right, let's talk about a term you've probably heard a million times, narcissism. But today, we're going to peel back the layers on the actual clinical condition, narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. We're moving past the buzzword to get to what this diagnosis really means. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get a clear definition of what NPD actually is. Then, we'll look behind that grandiose mask at what's really going on inside. We'll explore the different types of narcissism, dig into where it comes from, and finally, we'll talk about the real-world impact and why treatment can be so tough.
Okay, first things first. What exactly are we talking about when we say NPD? Let's move beyond the way we throw the word around online and get into the real clinical diagnosis.
So the official definition talks about a pervasive pattern, and that word is key. We're not talking about a one-off, selfish moment here. This is a deeply ingrained way of being that affects pretty much everything: how a person thinks, how they feel, how they interact with others, and it usually starts to show up in early adulthood. You can really break the whole thing down into three core pillars. First up is grandiosity. And I mean, this is way beyond just being confident. It's a deep-seated, unshakable belief that you're just better than everyone else. Then you've got this bottomless pit of a need for admiration. It's a constant craving for praise. And finally, and this one's huge, a profound lack of empathy. It's an inability to really recognize or care about other people's feelings, which, as you can imagine, makes real relationships almost impossible.
You know, it feels like we hear the word narcissist everywhere these days, right? But the actual clinical disorder, it's estimated to affect somewhere between 1% and 6% of the population, so it's not as common as you might think. And interestingly, it's diagnosed more often in men. Okay, this next part is maybe the most important thing to understand about NPD. It's all about the paradox, this huge hidden contrast between what you see on the outside and what's really going on inside.
So that mask you see, the arrogance, the confidence, the sense of entitlement, it's not what it looks like. It's not genuine self-love. It's actually a defense mechanism. Think of it like a giant fortress built to protect something incredibly fragile on the inside, a really unstable self-esteem that can be shattered by the tiniest bit of criticism.
So yeah, that's the key takeaway right there. The whole disorder, everything you see on the surface, it's all built around protecting that incredibly fragile core.
But it gets even more complex, because narcissism doesn't always show up in the same way. In fact, experts have identified two pretty different main presentations.
And here they are. You've got the grandiose or overt type on one side. This is the one we all think of, right? The loud, arrogant, look-at-me kind of person. But then, you have the vulnerable or covert type. And this is totally different on the surface. They can seem shy, defensive, super sensitive. They might even pull away from people. But underneath it all, that same core of entitlement and self-obsession is there. They get hurt really easily and are often dealing with a lot of hidden shame.
So, the big question is, where does all this come from? How does someone develop NPD? Well, as you can probably guess, it's not simple. There isn't just one cause. It's more like a complex recipe of different factors that lay the groundwork.
Yeah, there's no single smoking gun. It's really a mix of nature and nurture. You've got psychological factors, like what happened in early childhood. Maybe they got way too much praise or really harsh criticism or just emotional neglect. Then there are biological factors. There could be a genetic link or even differences in the parts of the brain that handle empathy. And you can't ignore social and cultural influences, like parenting styles or a society that puts a huge emphasis on status and winning.
You can kind of see how this path develops over time. It often starts way back in early childhood, maybe with an insecure attachment to caregivers. Then in the teenage years, some of those narcissistic traits can really pop up. And look, a certain amount of that is normal for a teenager. But for it to become NPD, those traits have to stick around. They become this rigid, unhealthy pattern that really starts causing major problems in their adult life.
All right, so let's get into the consequences. What does this disorder actually do to a person's life and to the lives of the people around them? And what about treatment? Is there a path forward?
Okay, this is a really key concept, narcissistic rage. It happens in two steps. First, there's what's called a narcissistic injury. Now, to you or me, this might seem like nothing, a little bit of criticism or maybe just feeling ignored. But for someone with NPD, it's like a direct attack on that super fragile ego. And the reaction? That's step two, narcissistic rage. It can be this sudden, intense explosion of anger, or sometimes they might just shut down completely. The reaction is almost always way out of proportion to what actually happened.
And another really important thing to remember is that NPD rarely travels alone.
It's often found alongside other major mental health challenges, things like depression, bipolar disorder, substance abuse, anxiety, you name it. And that, of course, makes everything from diagnosis to treatment a whole lot more complicated.
So how is it treated? The main path is long-term psychotherapy. And the goals? Well, they're huge. We're talking about trying to improve empathy, dial back the grandiosity, and help them build real emotional insight. It's basically trying to help someone tear down that defensive fortress they've built their whole life and build a genuine, stable sense of self from scratch. It's a monumental undertaking.
But we have to be honest, treatment is incredibly difficult. The very thing that defines the disorder, the lack of insight, the inability to handle criticism, is the biggest barrier to fixing it. Think about it. How do you treat someone who doesn't believe there's anything wrong with them? It's why dropout rates from therapy are unfortunately really high.
Which brings us to a really fascinating final question to think about. We all need healthy self-esteem, right? Confidence is a good thing. But where is that line? When does normal self-confidence tip over into a pathological disorder that causes real harm? It's a tricky question, and it really makes you think about the delicate balance of how we see ourselves.